Mr. Feynman wasn't joking. Chapter 3. Bureaucratic Self-Preservation, the Expanding Maze. Institutional inertia explains why the machinery keeps moving. Misaligned incentives explain why the machinery often moves in the wrong direction. Bureaucratic self-preservation explains something more unsettling. Why the machinery tends to grow even as results stagnate. Why failure so often becomes the justification for adding layers that make success harder. This is not a claim that administrators are villains or that organization is inherently bad. It is a claim about what complex institutions do unless deliberately constrained. They redirect energy toward maintaining and expanding themselves, because survival becomes the easiest measurable objective. In physics, when a theory keeps adding corrective terms to handle every anomaly, you eventually reach a point where the patches outweigh the core equation. The solution is not one more term. It is renormalization or unification, a cleaner framework that makes the complexity unnecessary. Institutions rarely do this voluntarily. Instead of revisiting first principles, they keep bolting new terms onto the old model until the system becomes mathematically elegant on an org chart and practically useless in a classroom. Expansion is the default solution. When schools underperform, the most common institutional response is not simplification. It is expansion, new programs, new offices, new specialists, new reporting requirements, new trainings, new committees, new implementation teams, new dashboards, new compliance checks. Each addition is defensible in isolation. Each addition promises to address the problem. But the system rarely subtracts what was added last year, because subtraction threatens jobs, budgets, reputations, and the comforting story that the institution is doing something. Over time, the school becomes a maze. Impressive motion, endless meetings, constant initiatives. Yet surprisingly little improvement in what matters most, a child's growing capacity to understand and think. The entropy argument, money is energy. Here, we again employ the language of physics. Money is not the purpose of education, but it is a useful proxy for energy, stored human labor, collected and routed into a system with an intended output, educated minds. When that energy enters a growing bureaucracy, it does not travel frictionlessly to the child. It is converted, dissipated, and scattered across layers of administration, compliance, coordination, and institutional self-maintenance. This is entropy in institutional form, not heat, but the economic equivalent. Wasted effort, meaningless busywork, frustrated talent, demoralized professionals, and resources that never reach the point of proper education. Sustained conceptual guidance of an individual student. In a healthy design, the system would be engineered to minimize dissipation and maximize the share of energy that reaches the learner. In an unhealthy design, the system rewards growth of the machinery itself, more layers, more procedures, more accountability artifacts, until the child becomes the smallest part of the system's attention. The personnel pattern. Growth without learning. One of the clearest indicators of bureaucratic self-preservation is staffing growth that outpaces student growth. From 1950 to 2009, student enrollment rose about 96%, while teachers increased 252% and administrators and non-teaching staff increased 702%. The point is not that every non-teaching role is waste. It is that the rate of bureaucratic growth can become detached from educational outcomes. When the system expands faster than it improves, it becomes harder to change course because more livelihoods, more contracts, and more internal constituencies depend on the maze continuing to exist. At that point, reform often means feed the maze. Why growth keeps happening, even with good intentions. Bureaucratic self-preservation persists through several predictable mechanisms. Compliance multiplication. Every mandate generates documentation, and documentation requires staff to produce, review, and archive it. Risk management. A visible process protects the institution from blame better than a hard-to-measure improvement in understanding. Program accretion. Yesterday's initiative becomes today's permanent department, even when it didn't solve the problem it was created to solve. Metric theater. Institutions prioritize what can be displayed, reports, numbers, frameworks, because display is legible to outsiders. None of this requires malicious intent. It only requires a system that rewards motion, documentation, and growth more reliably than it rewards conceptual results in children. A deliberate glimpse of hope, guardrails, or the maze wins. If entropy is the drift, then guardrails are the answer. A school that wants to resist bureaucratic self-preservation needs a clear definition of education that is strong enough to say no to activity that does not serve the child's mind. It needs a culture where the teacher's central function is protected, the teacher as epistemological guide, leading students from perception to concept to principle, not merely managing workflows. And in an AI era, the guardrails must be moral as well as procedural, because the easiest path will always be outsource the hard work and polish the output. A virtue framework supplies internal constraints, rationality, honesty, independence, integrity, justice, productiveness, pride, that can keep both adults and students anchored to the purpose even when the system pressures them toward theater. Many current AI plans in K-12 promise personalized learning and engagement through adaptive platforms and chatbots. Students receive bite-sized tasks, instant hints, and rapid feedback. On the surface, this looks like progress. But when these tools are deployed on top of the existing Prussian factory model of schooling, age-based grades, fragmented subjects, standardized pacing, they can actually accelerate the very problems parents already see. Fragmented knowledge, short attention spans, an inability to stay with a difficult idea long enough to truly understand it. In the next chapter, we turn to the maze's most powerful defense mechanism, fragmented accountability, how responsibility dissolves across so many actors that failure becomes everyone's fault and therefore no one's.